I didn't know Mary Ellen Wicks's. Not by name, not by face. I didn't know her laugh or how she took her coffee, or what kind of woman she was when she wasn't dying in a stranger's bed. All I knew was her grave. It was the one with no flowers. No mourners, no words spoken except the pastor's hollow verses echoing through rain. The preacher said she died giving life to twins. That's all we were told. He didn't even know the babies' names because there weren't any. Folks said she'd come through town just weeks ago, belly swollen and eyes downcast. Stayed in the back room of the tailor's shop. Gave birth and never woke up. The tailor's wife cried a little, but not enough to take the children home. She wrapped them in a basket and set them by the grave, like they were leftovers. It was. Raining the way it rains when the sky don't care no more, hard and heavy and without end. Most of the town didn't come. Just the pastor, the grave digger, the tailor's wife, and me. A drifter. A ghost with a beating heart. I'd only arrived in Dry Creek that morning, passing through with no reason to stay. I was only at the graveyard, 'cause my horse threw a shoe, and the blacksmith told me it'd be hours. I saw them before I heard them. 2 tiny bundles squirming in a wicker basket laid against the mud. One let out a cry so thin it barely cut through the rain. The other blinked up, unfazed. The pastor finished his prayer, made the sign of the cross, and cleared his throat. "Well," he said, not looking at the basket. "God rest her soul." They all turned to leave. No one looked back. I don't rightly know what came over me. Maybe it was the way the crying one clenched his fist like he already knew this world was cruel. Or maybe it was the way the other stared like he was waiting for anyone, to decide he was worth something. I stepped forward, soaked to the bone, boots deep in mud. I crouched by the basket and looked at them for a long while. "Where's their kin?" I asked. The tailor's wife shook her head. She had none, or wouldn't name them if she did. "They'll go to the orphan train," the pastor said softly, "if someone notifies Carson Ridge." The word orphan landed like a punch. I'd been one too, once. But I didn't ride no train. I was left behind, raised by hunger and cold and fists that never asked if I'd eaten. I didn't remember much about my mama, just the way her hand felt once when she brushed dirt from my face. Like love made flesh, I stood up. My voice came out hoarse, like it had been hiding. "I'll take him." The pastor blinked. "You?" "Mr. Cade, Weston Cade. You ain't known to her." "Ain't from here." "No," I said, "but I'm here now." I lifted the basket, holding it like it was, made of glass and grief. The crying one hiccuped and went quiet. The other yawned. The rain kept falling. No one stopped me. I walked away from that grave and didn't look back. Behind me, the preacher cleared his throat again. The tailor's wife muttered a prayer. I didn't need to hear it. I had already made mine. My cabin sat 12 miles outside Dry Creek, tucked into a bend where the sycamores bent low and the wind whistled like a warning. I hadn't meant to live in it long. It was a stopover, a hideout, a place where no one asked questions, and I didn't offer any, but now it was home. For them, it had to be. The storm chased us the whole way. Thunder cracked across the hills, like God was arguing with himself. I rode one-handed, the other cradling that basket tight to my chest, as if my body could shield them from all of it, the wind, the wet, the world. By the time we made it back, we were soaked clean through. The little one had started crying again. Mercy, I decided later, because her cries didn't ask for much. Just to be held, to be heard. The boy stayed quiet. That one was Abel, strong name. Sounded like something you had to earn. I kicked open the cabin door and carried them in. The fire was long, cold. My rifle leaned in the corner. A pan of untouched beans sat stiff on the table. That place had never seen a baby. It barely knew how to keep a man alive. But it would learn. First came the warmth. I lit a blaze that dam. Near set the chimney on fire, then stripped him down one at a time and wrapped them in the only wool I had, a horse blanket. I didn't know what to feed them. I boiled milk and dipped cloth in it. Mercy took it like a kitten. Abel spit it back like I'd insulted him. I cleaned them as best I could, wiping their tiny hands and wiping harder at the fear in me that I was going to mess this up at some point in the night. I sat in the rocking chair. Hadn't rocked in years with both of them on my lap. The rain still hammered the roof. The logs popped in the fire. I looked down at them, and something in me broke open. I used to think I was built hollow, that I'd been born missing some part folks needed to love right. My father left when I was 3. My mother drank herself numb. I learned to survive, not to care. But now, holding these 2 strangers, these 2 tiny lives I'd never asked for, I felt like a man come back from the dead. I whispered their names into the smoke. Abel, Mercy. They blinked like they understood something I didn't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there rocking, feeding, wiping, warming. I felt clumsy, lost, but not alone. By morning the storm had passed. The sun crept through the cracks in the walls, laying soft stripes across the floor. I looked down and saw Mercy curled against my arm, breathing deep. Abel had a fist wrapped in my coat. I'd buried a lot of things in my life, dreams, friends, memories. But this felt like the first thing I'd ever tried to grow. I knew the town would talk, that questions would come, that I wasn't ready. But I also knew this. They were mine now. Word travels faster than wagons out here, and by the time I stepped into Dry Creek 2 weeks later for supplies, the whispers had already grown roots. That's him. I heard a man mutter by the general store, came out of nowhere, took her. Babies like he's the Lord Almighty. Another scoffed. I didn't answer. I wasn't there for a fight, just milk powder and linens. But folks kept staring like I'd committed a crime. No one offered help. No one offered thanks until Clara Gable showed up. It was a Saturday. The town was swelling with traders and tobacco. Smoke. I'd left Abel and Mercy at the cabin, asleep in their crate-turned cradles, thinking I'd be back in 2 hours tops. I was loading sacks onto my mule when I heard a voice say, sharp and certain, "Those babies are not yours." I turned. She stood like someone used to being obeyed. Hair pinned high, eyes sharp as glass. She wore city shoes and smelled of perfume. Out of place like a letter from somewhere you never lived. "I'm Clara Gable," she said. "Mary Ellen's cousin." I just stared at her. She died with no will, no husband. I'm her next of kin. She said kin like it meant more than love. I took them in when no one else would, I said. No law made me do it. No promise, just need. "And that's admirable," she replied, cool as creek water. "But kin is kin. They're family. I've come to claim them." A few folks had stopped to listen, pretending to browse barrels of flour and bolts of cloth. I felt like a man on trial without a judge. "They're not property," I said. "They ain't cattle to be passed around." She stepped closer. "I have a house, a governess, education, safety." "You have money," I snapped. "Don't mistake that for love." Her nostrils flared. "And what do you have, Mr. Cade? A shack in the woods and calluses?" I got 2 arms that held them every night. 2 hands that cleaned them, fed them, held their heads when they cried. She narrowed her eyes. "This won't be a discussion. I'm filing with the court in Fairlight." "You go ahead," I said. "But you better bring more than papers." That night I rode home hard and fast, heart in my throat. I held Mercy, tighter than usual, watched Abel sleep with one eye open. I knew how this would go. I'd seen it before. Blood mattered more than bonds. A cousin with a corset and a lawyer beat a man with dirt under his nails every time. But I couldn't let them go. Not now. Not ever. So I wrote a letter to Judge Rennett in Fairlight, the same man who jailed me years ago for a fistfight I didn't start. I asked for a hearing. I'd plead my case, speak my truth. Even if it cost me everything. I tucked the letter in my saddlebag the next morning, kissed both babies on the head, and said aloud what I hadn't dared to yet. "You are my children." and I will not give you up. Fairlight was a day's ride northeast, a bigger town with paved walks, brass knockers on doors, and people who looked through you instead of at you. I got in the night before the hearing and slept on a bench outside the courthouse, wrapped in a wool coat that still smelled like firewood and formula. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the ride there. Everything was polished and proper. Wooden pews, a high bench, flags hanging limp like they were tired of standing. Clara Gable arrived in a velvet coat with pearl buttons, escorted by a lawyer named Finch, who smelled like ink and arrogance. She didn't glance at me, didn't have to. Her posture said it all. This was a formality. She'd already won. The judge, Rennet, entered, same stiff back and drooping jowls, I remembered. He didn't recognize me, or maybe he did, and chose not to. Either way, he asked the clerk to read the filings, and then motioned for Finch to speak. Your Honor, Finch began, this is a simple matter. Miss Gable is the only known relative of Mary Ellen Wicks's. She has the means, the education, and the social standing to raise the children properly. Mr. Cade has no blood relation, no legal claim, no permanent residence, and no witnesses to speak for his character. I didn't flinch. I waited. Judge Rennet turned to me. Mr. Cade, do you have anything to say? I stood. My palms were sweating, but my voice came out steady. I don't have land papers. I don't have wealth, but I have them. I've fed them from my hand, rocked them through the night, named them like they were my own. I may not be kin by blood, but I'm kin by everything that counts. If you take them from me or rip a life from their bones, they've already started to trust. Finch stood again. Emotion does not supersede the law. No, I said, louder now, but it sure as hell makes a better parent. The room fell still. Rennet sighed. The law is clear. Custody will go to Miss Gable. Temporary, at first. A review in 90 days. I didn't hear the rest. My ears rang like a bell tower had cracked in my skull. They handed over the papers. Told me I could say goodbye. I walked outside and saw Clara, standing by a carriage, Mercy in her arms. Abel was in the nursemaid's lap, blinking like he'd just woken from a bad dream. I walked up, slow. My legs didn't feel real. I hope you give them more than lace and books, I said. Clara looked at me. Her eyes were soft for the first time. I'm doing what I believe is right. So am I whispered. She turned away. I rode home. Hollow. My cabin was still there. Their blankets still folded. Their bottles still warm from the sun sneaking through the cracks. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat. I don't know how long passed. Could have been a day, could have been 3. But then I heard wheels on dirt, a wagon. I staggered out, ready to scream or beg. I didn't know which. Clara stepped down. Alone, she walked up and handed me 2 sleeping babies. I thought I could raise them like dolls, like tasks, but they cried for you. Her hand shook. They cried for you, Weston. She turned and left without another word. I didn't chase her. I just held them, and this time I didn't have to say it. They were already mine. The days after their return felt like a second birth. This time I was ready. I built a cradle out of pine, hung a ribbon in the window just because Mercy smiled at the color. I whittled a horse from scrapwood for Abel, who immediately tried to eat it. They belonged here now. Not by default, by choice. My choice. Clara didn't send word again, and I didn't ask for any. The town softened a little. The preacher stopped me once to ask how the twins were doing. Even the Taylors. Wife brought a quilt, but peace is a thin skin stretched over boiling water. And it tore fast. It started with a man at the edge of my property. He didn't come close, just watched from the tree line. Tall, bald arms like iron gates. Next day, another one. This one had a ledger and a pistol. When I approached, he spoke real calm, you Cade? I nodded. He opened the ledger and tapped a name. Mary Ellen Wicks's. Owed a debt. Significant. To who? Everett Carrick. Outer Wichita. Loaned her to keep quiet. Land, passage, medical, she didn't pay, and now she's dead. She's got nothing left. Oh, she's got something, he said, eyes drifting toward the cabin window where Abel's tiny face pressed against the glass. Her legacy, her line. Carrick's got interest in that. My fists clenched. You saying they're collateral? He smiled. They're assets, Mr. Cade, and Carrick collects what's his, soon. They left without incident, but I knew what was coming. I'd heard of Carrick. Owned men like cattle, bought lawmen like salt. If he wanted something, he didn't negotiate, he invaded. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote their names on the cabin floorboards with a knife, Abel and Mercy. I carved them into the frame above the hearth, into the backs of the chairs, into the door itself, like scripture. Like a warning, I dug traps in the tree line, repaired my rifle, nailed shut the window's dot, and then I sat down and held them both in my lap. I ain't your blood, I whispered, but I'm your wall. And if they want through, they gotta break me first. Abel reached up and touched my chin. Mercy cooed in her sleep. I'd never killed a man outside war. But Carrick wasn't sending men to talk. He was sending them to take. And I'd be damned if I let that happen again. Not like when I was a boy. Not like when my sister vanished in the night and no one came looking. No. This time the fight came to me, and I was ready to meet it. The first real warning came from Jeb Tanner, the old sheriff, now just a limping man with too many regrets and a shotgun he pretended he didn't need. He showed up on my porch one evening, jaw working a piece of jerky, eyes scanning the horizon. Heard. Carrick's got a wagon headed this way, he said. Big one. 6 riders, maybe more. You got 2-3 days. I know, I said. He looked down at the trap I was setting under the steps. You gonna shoot it out? If I have to. Jeb squatted, knees popping. Used to think the law could fix everything. Then Carrick came through here a few years back, paid off the judge, bought the bank, left a widow and 2 orphans behind. No one ever asked their names. What are you saying, Jeb? I'm saying, he sighed, I ain't sheriff no more. But if you're staying to fight, I'll make sure folks hear why. He stood, slapped my shoulder, and walked off without another word. That night I locked the door and sat by the fire. Abel played with a spoon. Mercy crawled into my lap. I stared into the flames and remembered faces, men I'd buried, promises I'd broken, a life I'd tried to outrun. But now I had 2 reasons to stop running. The next morning I saw dust on the ridge. Carrick's men, they didn't come fast. They came like they knew I'd be watching, like they wanted me to sweat. There were 5 at first, all mounted, coats dark, rifles slung lazy across their backs. One held a paper. The other had a chain. I loaded my rifle, strapped a knife to my boot, and nailed the shutters shut. Inside. I fed the twins and tucked them into the pantry, which I'd fortified with logs and old furniture. If the cabin burned, that corner would hold the longest. I laid my mother's old rosary beside Mercy and kissed Abel's forehead. I ain't much for prayers, I whispered. But if you hear one from me tonight, you better listen close. That evening the sun burned orange over the trees. Carrick himself didn't come. Instead, he sent a man named Hatch, thick-necked, white beard, voice like broken gravel. You Weston Cade? He asked from his saddle. I stepped out on the porch, rifle in hand, barrel pointed down. I am. Carrick's got legal claim over those kids. He's got lies, paperwork written in shadow. Hatch held up a folded document. Says, here the woman owed $10,000, interest included. He's entitled to recoup in kind. They're not things, I growled. They're children. Then you shouldn't have wrapped 'em in debt. That's when I raised the rifle. Just high enough, Hatch laughed. You'll die over them? No, I said. I'll live over them, and you'll die if you try me. He paused, looked past me to the roof, the trees, the traps. Then he grinned. We'll be back at sunup. As he rode off, the others followed, slow and sure. Inside, The babies slept, and I sat at the window, rifle across my lap, waiting for war with a heart full of love. The sun rose blood-red behind the ridge. I didn't sleep a wink. The rifle sat cold in my hands. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and fear. Abel stirred once in the night, but I rocked him quiet. Mercy didn't make a sound. Maybe she knew what was coming. Maybe she trusted I'd keep my word. At first light, I heard hoofbeats. 6 riders. They spread out across my clearing like they were preparing to plant death in the soil. Hatch led them, chewing something, grinning wide like a man who'd already won. Last chance, he called. Hand 'em over, Cade. I stepped outside, rifle at my hip, boots planted. They're not yours to take. Hatch pulled a pistol and waved his men forward. Fine by me. They surged. I fired first, dropped the lead rider's horse, not the man. I wanted warning, not blood. That warning didn't work. 2 shots cracked the front post near my head. Another shattered the lantern hanging from the eaves. I ducked back into the cabin and braced the door. My traps sprang. A wire caught one man's leg and sent him howling into the dirt. I heard cursing. Then fire. They lit torches. Threw one. Through the window. It landed near the cradle. I kicked it aside and shot through the slats, striking another horse. The beast screamed and bucked, throwing its rider into the brush. Still, they came. I was reloading, heart racing, when a voice bellowed from the tree line. Enough. It was Jeb, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood half the town, the tailor, the midwife, 2 stable hands, even the pastor. Some held rifles, others had shovels or nothing at all. But their faces were steel. Clara Gable was there too. She stepped forward, her fine coat traded for a working shawl. She pointed at Hatch. "You want to take them?" she shouted. "You—" Answer to all of Dry Creek. Hatch hesitated. "Carrick owns the paper," he barked. "And we own this land," Jeb shot back, leveling his shotgun. "You ain't walking out with nothing but bruises." Hatch sneered. "You're backing a drifter?" "He's more kin than the man who sold their mama for a debt." Something in Hatch's eyes flickered. He looked around, outnumbered, outmatched. Then he spat in the dirt and turned his horse. "Carrick'll hear about this." "Good," I said. "Let him come." The riders turned, one by one, limping, cursing, retreating. I collapsed to my knees. When I opened the cabin door, Clara was already there. She looked at me, sweat-soaked, bleeding from a splinter on my cheek, and said, "I was wrong. You're not just their father. You're their home." Behind her, Jeb handed me a folded envelope. "Adoption papers," he said. "Signed, sealed, and witnessed. You're theirs now. Officially." I didn't cry. Not until I picked up Abel and Mercy and held them against my chest right there on the floor where I had once rocked them, alone and unsure. Now I wasn't alone, and I wasn't unsure. Spring came soft that year. First the violets pushed through the frost, then the creek thawed, babbling like it had stories to tell. The air no longer tasted of smoke and iron, but of pine and new grass. And for the first time in my life, I let myself breathe easy. Abel started walking, sideways at first, like a drunk squirrel, then running, arms wide, mouth grinning full of teeth he barely had. Mercy was more patient. She learned to speak before she walked, and her first word wasn't "pa" or "no." It was "home." I built them swings from sycamore, taught Abel to stack stones, Mercy to hum along when I sang. Every day ended the same, both of them, asleep in my arms by the fire, the scent of cornbread and soap in the air, and peace resting on the roof like an old friend. The cabin changed, too. I added a room, patched the roof proper. Folks from town started visiting more. Jeb came by once. A week, always with something wrapped in paper. The preacher delivered a Bible with their names inked in the front, the pages still crisp and unread. Clara wrote once from St. Louis, said she was sorry again, said she was proud. Enclosed was a drawing of Mercy and Abel she'd sketched from Emor. Why, I pinned it over the hearth. There were no more debt collectors. Carrick never came. Maybe he knew what Dry Creek had become, not just a town, but a wall of hearts too stubborn to break. Maybe he saw what I'd become, not a drifter, not a nobody, but a father forged in fire. I'd be lying if I said I didn't still think about Mary Ellen. Sometimes at night, I'd sit on the porch and whisper thanks to a woman I never met. Her death gave me life. Her babies gave me purpose. Her story became mine. One afternoon I found Abel scribbling on the porch with charcoal. I asked him what he was drawing. "You," he said. "Fighting monsters." Mercy nodded beside him. "And winning." I smiled, not because they thought I was strong, but because they knew I would try. Later that night, after I tucked them in, I walked to the corner of the cabin where their names were still carved in the floor, added one more word beneath them, .forever. And for the first time, I believed it. Thanks for riding with us through another tale from the Old West. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. More adventures are waiting on the trail ahead. See you next time.